Very warm welcome to all of you for this very interesting topic, crafting communities. This is an interesting conversation we are looking forward to have with Sumita Ghosh, Ronald, and Mira Goradia, three leaders of our craft community that we really look up to. So I think it's a session. It's more a discussion. It's a conversation. So we would like to keep it light, and we would like to keep it as a conversation rather than a long discourse. We will be happy to take any questions you may have. So please drop your questions on chat, and wherever appropriate, if it's pertinent to that specific point, we will take the question at that point, or we'll try to take the questions at the end of the session. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you to this very interesting discussion. Now, I would like to request, Nita Shah. Nita has been a key force at GoCoop. She has been managing our supply chain and all the supply chain partners, the entire ecosystem, which is the foundation of GoCoop. She's been managing that for many years now. And Nita, it's great to have you with us, and it'll be good if you can start the discussion with a round of introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Shiva. Uh, Good morning to everyone, and good morning to our panelists. I'll take a moment to introduce our panelists and speakers for the session today. Our first panelist, Sumita Ghosh, is the founder and managing director of Rangasutra, a social enterprise which works for socio-economic development in rural India by engaging both the community and the market. Prior to setting up Rangasutra in 2006, Sumita lived and worked in different parts of rural India, primarily in western Rajasthan with the Urmul Trust in Bikaner, for over 10 years working with rural communities for social change and economic development. Sumita has a master's degree in economics and in conflict resolution. She is a recipient of several fellowships and awards, the latest being the Nari Shakti Purashkar Award by the President of India on the 8th March 2016. She is also a yoga practitioner and a certified yoga teacher. Welcome, Shumita ji, to Crafting Communities. Our second panelist, Mira Garodia, is a TISS graduate and has worked in the craft sector for over 3 decades. She has co-founded Kutch Mahila Sangathan and was the director of Khamir from 2009 to 2016. During her tenure in Khamir, she was involved in the Kala Cotton Initiative, which was developed during that point of time. As a consultant in the artisan sector, Mira has been consulting with various organizations like Jaipur, IMG Reliance, and Center for Petroleum, among others. She's been an active member of the Creative Dignity Network that emerged last year as a response to support the artisan sector due to the pandemic. Welcome, Mira, to Crafting Communities. Our third speaker and panelist, Ronald van Heftoff, is a Dutch national who partially is living in Gurgaon, India. Ronald has 35 plus years of experience broadly in retail, design, sourcing, sales and marketing, and supply chain management. He was a CEO at a number of leading retail chains in the Benelux and has received several retail awards. Early 2013, Ronald was appointed director at Wings International Private Limited, and he shifted to India to establish Women on Wings, where the aim was to build up a strong Indian organization and partner base to achieve its goals, co-create 1 million jobs for women in rural India. Currently, Ronald works with 30 plus Women on Wings partners, which are Indian social enterprises and NGOs in the sector. He helps them on scaling their business in a professional and sustainable way. Ronald is also an advisor to the board of SVP India. Welcome, Ronald, to this Crafting Community session.
Thank you.
Last but not the least, I would like to introduce Shiva Deva Reddy, founder of GoCoop. GoCoop has been a result of Shiva's passion to help people achieve their social and economic goals through technology innovation. Shiva has over 17 years of experience in global experience before he started GoCorp, and he was working in the Silicon Valley as a director of Innovation Center in Accenture. Under his leadership, GoCorp received the Government of India's first National Award for Handloom Marketing's e-commerce in the year 2015. Shiva was also a part of a champion change by Honorable Minister of India and Niti Aayog in the year 2017. I would now like to hand over the session to Shiva to take this discussion forward.
Thanks, Nita. I think once again, very warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists. Also to all the participants who have joined the webinar this morning. It's a topic very close to my heart, and in some ways, it's the reason why I started GoCoop. So this is a session that I'm more excited about than any other session I've done so far. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today. I think the common premise, and it's not so difficult for all of us to imagine that a whole is always greater than sum of its parts. This is what Aristotle said thousands of years ago. Seems quite obvious and simple, but much more difficult in practice, in bringing people together and, to really generate collective action and to build communities. I think this is much more difficult and much more harder, much more easier said than done. Cooperative and community-based enterprises have been a subject of interest for many of us. And some of you may be very familiar with cooperatives, have been working with cooperatives, but cooperative is in simple terms, an organization in which members, for example, farmers or weavers with very limited resources can come together and can collectively strive to achieve their common economic and social goals. India is one of the largest suppliers of handmade goods with over 10 million, officially 10 million plus strong weaver and artisan community. But these communities are fairly, disaggregated with small and low capacities, located mostly in rural parts of the country. And there have been many initiatives to set up or form collectives, producer companies, where artisans themselves are stakeholders. And Rangasutra is one such fine example of an artisan-based craft enterprise. And during this pandemic, what we have seen is that many of the groups, many of the clusters have been deeply affected by the pandemic due to the broken value chain, broken market linkages. But I think which resulted in a lot of piling up of inventory. Some of you are also familiar with Creative Dignity, which has been a nationwide movement which has brought together diverse creative producers, practitioners, professionals to energize the ecosystem that Indian artisan community needed at the time of during this challenging time. Different people associated with the craft sector came forward voluntarily, offering their support, be it in catalog development, design inputs, guiding the artisans, promoting their products online, and in some cases also providing financial assistance to sustain the artisan community. Some help was always there as part of this initiative. As we're going through this pandemic, working in the craft sector, we are all in our own way supporting our artisan communities, their livelihoods. It could be through financial support, through market access, through product development. Our focus and approach could be different, but the objectives are same. Women on Wings is a Dutch India based NGO which has been focusing on creating 1 million jobs for women in rural India, working with its business partners. They believe in providing consulting and business knowledge to social enterprises there and helping their business partners and enabling them to grow, thereby creating more jobs in rural India. WOW is also creating a community or a network of social enterprises, and I must say we are fortunate. Both Rangasutra and GoCorp have been part of Women on Wings network for the last many years. One good thing which resulted from COVID-19 is that the craft ecosystem came together as never before. But how do we take it forward from here? How do we create and develop craft communities? How do we create and collaborate as an ecosystem? So these are the questions we want to answer in this particular session in the crafting communities conversation today. And let me start with Sumita ji. Um, Sumita ji, I mean, Rangasutra is a very inspiring story. It's a story that many of us are familiar with, but just for all of us to understand, what has been the genesis of Rangasutra, what led to its creation, and what were the challenges in getting started. It'll be great if you can share some light on this.
Thank you, Shiva, and hello everyone. It's always something fresh for me to share the genesis of Rangsutra whenever I talk about it. The idea actually came to me when I was on a sabbatical and away from the hurly-burly of work. And I was writing a paper on organizations needed for the 21st century, and keeping in mind, conflicts that the world was facing in the year. This is the year 2002, and so this 2002, as some of you and many of you will remember, was 10 years after India opened up and to liberalization and globalization. And many of us have been beneficiaries of that, in the sense, all of us, who've had access to education, had better work opportunities, employment opportunities. But there were many, many more who lived in rural India, farmers and artisans and other shepherds, who I had worked with prior to that time when I was on a sabbatical, for, who were sort of struggling to stay in the same place. The benefits of opening up the market had not really reached down or trickled down to them. And so when I came back, of course, I connected with the people I had worked with in Urmul, Rajasthan before. And, one of the things that everyone said is that we need a stronger market presence. We need a stronger market presence. Yes, we have amazing skills. We are very well organized, but we need a stronger market presence. And that's where the first innovation actually came to us, in the sense that we decided that to have a stronger market presence, you need to engage directly with the market, not be so dependent on grants and support from, organizations like government or non-government organizations. And so we decided to set up a company. And because in a company we felt, would be sort of more aligned to the market in a sense, not market driven, but market aware in a sense. But that was easier said than done. We set up the company, and then, of course, we set it up as a producer company. In those days, producer companies, I think we were the first in northern India to have a craft producer company. At that time, the other producer companies were two milk cooperatives in Haryana. So no one knew what producer companies were. We found it very difficult to even open a bank account. It took us 3 months to open a bank account. And then after that, we got stuck because we didn't have money. And at that time, we really came at a sort of a crossroads, because all our traditional ways in which I was used to raising money by writing proposals, or by, in this case, going to a bank, didn't work out. The bank wanted 3 years balance sheet, wanted collateral, we didn't have. So that's when we decided, okay, let's go back to the artisans that we are. Let's talk to artisans and put this across to them. And I was very hesitant about investing, about how much they would want to invest. And but to my surprise, they agreed, and 1,000 artisans who I had worked with before in Rajasthan put in 1,000 rupees each. We got our first equity of 10 lakhs. Then I got very worried, because these were, 1,000 people putting their money, their faith, their trust. So I borrowed from friends and family, put in another 10 lakhs. And after that, seeing this beginning, we got support from impact investors and Fab India. Fab India played a great part in helping us set us up, and move from the non-profit to the for-profit world. So that was the way we began, Shiva.
That's great. That's great, Sumita. So what were the other challenges? I mean, did you find any challenges in mobilizing the community, Sumita? I mean, like bringing people together?
So as I said, I had actually lived and worked in Western Rajasthan for 10 years before
Wow.
setting up Rangsutra. So one of the things we realized very early, that when you're starting something new, your co-travelers need to have trust in each other,
Right.
need to have faith in each other, that respect for each other. And so we decided we would keep it localized to Western Rajasthan. We did have a couple of other organizations from other parts of India, but that didn't work out because it was too spread out initially. So yes, I would say that trust in each other, respect for each other's work, also respecting the fact that everyone has an important role to play, from the woman who's doing an embroidery to doing embroidery, to the weaver who is weaving the fabric, to the tailor who's stitching it. They're as important as the designer who's who's designing the products, or the production manager who's supervising everything, or me who is trying to get everyone together, because my role was basically to get everyone. But one thing I'd like to say, initially there was a little bit of skepticism from my not-for-profit colleagues
Yeah.
at that point of time, that this one is selling out and they're starting a company. But very gradually, everyone, we realized that it is, and I'd like to say it right up here in Rangsutra. We have a board which has representatives of artisans. It has representatives of our investors on the board,
Yeah.
and there is a healthy respect for each other, because the investors or even our market partners like Fab India know that without artisans they are not going to get the products, and the artisans also know that without the support of the retailer we are not going to be able to sell the products. So that kind of, not have getting out of this us versus them mindset, and having, like, okay, we are together in it, our futures are interconnected in different ways, but we are connected. So that really helped us, I think, to if you recall, I said I was doing a master's in conflict resolution, and so
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was one of the key values. How does one get people across the spectrum to come together and work together, building on strengths rather than getting stuck on each other's weaknesses and faults. You know,
That's
so
great. I
that's
think you had the relationships, and I think you earned their trust as well, Sumita, with all your work in that region, maybe for years before starting Rangasutra. I think that probably also helped and gave confidence to all the artisans.
yes, certainly yes.
So have things changed, Sumita, over the years? Let's say it's been 15 years or 16 years since you formed Rangasutra. How are the relationships now, and how is the community emerging?
So things, yes, there've been ups and downs, and not just because of the financial ups and downs, because that happens in any company, any organizations. But I think the greatest change, biggest change has come with scaling up. And that's where, we are unable to have that one-to-one interaction that I used to have so often. It's been some years, I think, well, not years, but it's months since I meet artisans now. I just about get a chance to meet all my colleagues who are in different parts of the country. We have offices.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, so that's been a little bit of a challenge. How does one maintain that, that people connection, even while you're scaling up and chasing targets? And we decided that we would scale up and chase targets. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the fine balance.
Yeah, that's great, Sumita. I mean, way ahead. I'm sure it was like breaking such, I mean, so much new ground 15, 16 years ago. Whereas even today, I mean, as a for-profit company ourselves, I can tell you there is so much skepticism, right? Especially in craft sector, that we want to be a for-profit social enterprise that's actually looked upon with lot of skepticism even today. And you have done this 16 years ago, so that's a great achievement, Sumita. So just moving on to Ronald. So Ronald, how do you see artisan collectives, as a way to enable sustainable livelihoods? Sumita is a great example. Rangasutra is a great example. But what is your perspective? You've been working with more than 40, 45 social enterprises, and most of them are in craft sector. What's been your experience?
Right. Okay, thank you, Shiva. First of all, welcome to everybody. And I'm really privileged to be in a panel like today. I think that's the good thing of a crisis. And we always say never waste a good crisis. And I'm sure that also COVID-19 will bring a lot of, despite the fact that there has been a lot of suffering, of course, in the beginning. And of course, it's not over yet. There will be a lot of repercussions and ripple effects of this crisis. But on the other hand, it also brings a good set of new insights. And I think one of these good things is the conversation that we have today about cluster development, about working in partnerships. I think that's absolutely the way forward. I think something that we learned during this crisis. In a way, I think for a lot of people, they realized that they are not alone in the world, that there are a lot of people around them, and that actually working together is the way forward. And I think if you look at cluster development, I think it's absolutely, I think, a no-brainer for the future. Despite the fact that we have, of course, digitization, and of course, everybody thinks that digitization is the solution for everyone, for everything, because now each and every artisan can reach out to the market. But I think that's not reality. Not each and every artisan will have access to the market. Not each and every artisan will know about what's happening in the market. So I think the forming of clusters and organizations who are able to create these clusters of artisans, I think by collaboration and by having the right inputs, and most important, what we have seen over the years, is that backend development is not the most difficult thing. Backend development is for all of us where the heart is. We can train a lot of artisans, and we can do skill building, and we can do capacity building. But the link to the market is actually the weakest link. And you only can reach out to the markets if you bring your power together. And it's on cluster level, number one. And I think from cluster level, you need to collaborate more with more clusters together to reach out to the market. And sometimes people are not happy when I say this, but a long time NGOs were about EGOs, about egos, and every NGO wanted to have their own awards. Every NGO wanted to have their own brand. I think that time is over, because we need each other, and we need to collaborate together to have a successful sector of handloom and handicrafts. And we only can be successful if we join hands together, if we set away our egos, if we start collaborating and really have the intention. What we have seen over the years, that it's really difficult, because I don't know what it is, whether there is something where people feel difficult to start joining hands. If we have many organizations where which work in the textile industry, which are working in handloom, handicraft, and Shiva, we always try to connect them to the GoGo platform, but it is difficult. We really have to almost take their hands, bring them to Bangalore, give them your hands, and we should be part of it to really make it happen. And that sometimes worries me. And I think in a way it has to do that we are all 24/7 busy with running our own business, and we are very much focused on the back end. Yeah. And I think we have to make that kind of mind change, that instead of working from inside out, so working from the back end and push to the market, that we have to start working outside in together and see what is required in the market and how can we match the market. And you can only do it together.
Yeah, absolutely, Ronald. I think collaboration is the key, and it's been difficult. I mean, and you have been trying to do this for so many years now, right? I mean, Women on Wings and you personally, you and Shilpa personally. I think just going back a little bit to the community-based enterprises, Ronald. So I think this also has a different dynamics, right, of running these organizations, and Sumita knows this firsthand. But in your experience, when you're building a craft enterprise, obviously not all craft enterprises have to be community based. Some are design led enterprises.
Yeah.
There are
Sure.
brands which are lifestyle based. What do you think are the challenges or vis-a-vis advantages of a community based enterprise, let's say, with versus a normal any other enterprise, craft based enterprise?
Right. Yeah. I think it's already in the name, craft enterprise. I think that's immediately where the biggest gap is. If you look at community based enterprises, the skills are there. They know how to weave. They know how to embroider. That's the craft which is there. But turning into an enterprise requires professional people, requires capacity building, requires professionalism in the organizations. And actually that's, if you look at even also, we talk about the textile industry. If you also look at the agribusiness about forming FPOs, it's actually more or less the same, whether it's farmers or the weavers or textile handicraftsmen and women. It's a lack of business knowledge. It's a lack of the professionalism to really act like an enterprise. And that's the biggest gap, what we have seen over the years. And then you have kind of catch-22, because they don't actually, maybe they even don't realize what they are lacking. So and because of not realizing what they are lacking, they never come to the level what is required to become a sustainable community-based enterprise. So that's where you need interventions from outside to build the capacity to make them aware of what it means to run an enterprise. And actually, that's what we as Women on Wings try to do. Really start with making a simple business plan. Think about what do you want to achieve? What is your goal? And what is required in skill development? What is required in human resources and in financial resources? And you have to, and first of all, I think that's the most important one. I almost forget it. Having an entrepreneur at the helm. If there's no entrepreneur, then it's a dead-end road.
That's interesting. Very interesting, Ronald. I mean, I think many years ago, I've been reading been reading about research on cooperatives and what have been the reasons of, the challenges that cooperatives face. And very interesting that, these are the 2 points which I very distinctly remember were the 2 most important challenges of cooperatives. And to a certain extent, the demise of cooperatives or decline of cooperatives has been the lack of professional management and not having an entrepreneurial mindset. How do you develop these organizations if you don't have? And the ones which have been very successful are the ones which had that kind of entrepreneurial mindset or the leadership in place. These cooperatives were very successful and they emerged as market leaders.
Yes, right.
Great. And thanks, Ronald. And I think, my next speaker probably will shoot me down for not using the right terms. I'm not a social or development graduate, Mira, so so my terminology may not be most appropriate. But yeah,
I won't shoot you. I won't shoot you. Go ahead. Say what you want.
So yeah, I think So software engineering, talking about social development sometimes is a little bit of a challenge, but yeah, I'm trying my best. So Veera, it's been a great experience to be part of CD, right? And personally, it's been to me at least, and to a lot of us, I think it's been a revelation that how people can come together, and how people can voluntarily uh, join hands and create such a strong force, and that too in a such a short period of time. So can you tell us more about how did this movement start, and how it has evolved over the last let's say 8-9 months?
Uh, okay, I think like Shumita, I've been of course CD is just about 7-8 months old, but I've been narrating its story for so long now. But each time I try to do it differently. So Shiva, you are part of it. So is Shumita. We spoke to Ronald too about it at some point. So when it actually began just with a WhatsApp group, just a few of us wanting to do something. And before we knew it, we were just reaching out to everybody in the field. And all of us, when we began Shiva, we had actually no clue what we were going to do together. It was just the spirit, it was just some human connection that got triggered because of the crisis, because we felt that there was some big human sort of crisis that was going to unfold, especially for the artisans, that nobody was talking about, even at an official level. Uh, and we felt that we just needed to do something. So that's how it began, Shiva. Just all of us having a conversation about what to do.
Yeah.
And then we decided that, like what you said, what everybody's saying, that, it's such a diverse sector. There are so many different, people engaged with the sector. And so none of us really had a clear idea that what is going on. Like with the migrant crisis, it was very clear for everyone to see what was happening, what was the crisis that was unfolding. With artisans, we just heard that, okay, someone is in this kind of situation, or there are stocks, markets have collapsed, so sales have stopped. And so we decided to roll out a survey which highlighted a few crises that were going to come, and also some that were already sort of affecting the artisans. So with that initial diagnostic survey, we actually kind of set the course for what then began. And with very simple steps, like beginning with fundraising, just to reach out to vulnerable artisans, so that there would be some sort of enhancement to the rations that they were already getting through PDS, which was just simple wheat and paddy. So it was just to enhance that. We began that drive. And before we realized, the network brought together individuals who all had different strengths. So somebody was very strong with making funding connections, so that person just got activated and created the funding connections. Someone was very strong with analyzing the data, so they started analyzing. Someone was very strong in creating the network across India, in reaching out to different stakeholders across each state and bringing them together as state hubs. Somebody felt that we needed to reach out to design students and get them to start helping artisans with digital skills, because that's what was now going to be required if selling had to begin again. So that was really what the network showed us, that when you come together, you actually pool everybody's strengths, and someone's strength compensates someone's weakness, and together then you can become a really formidable force. And what really happened is, and I think it's happened in human history for like millennia, is that whenever there's a crisis, we come together, we collaborate. Earlier, it was collaboration for survival over other species, and which is what then marked the way we work. Because, like Harari says, we then created culture, which ensured that we continued to collaborate. And that's what has given us today dominion over the rest of the species and the planet. So, but we forget that when there is a sense of normalcy, and a crisis kind of forces us to go back to our original instincts, which is to work together, which is to collaborate, which is to be connected at a very human level. And I think what all of us, including you and Neeta, Shiva, must have realized, that what I think we all enjoyed in the Creative Dignity Network was just connecting with each other. I mean, of course, we were all there to wanting to support artisans, but just the what we found with each other, we broke down, like Ronald says, some of those silos, some of those egos, because earlier different players in the ecosystem would have hesitation. Like even my speaking for myself, as when I was heading Kamir, we were very distrustful of e-commerce, the whole e-commerce phenomenon,
Yeah.
because we felt that crafts is about touchy feely, and how is e-commerce going to do it. These were very serious reservations we had at that time. And it was just all these sort of blocks breaking down, everything breaking down, and us just rediscovering everything with a very fresh open mind. I think that is what made all of us connect with something very basic, the basic thing of one wanting to give to a fellow human being who was in a difficult situation, and all of us coming together to do that, and all of us then interacting with each other without all these barriers and prisons that we have in our mind about each other. I think that was really what really gave a lot of energy to the initial 6 months of the movement, and the results are there for everyone to see. I mean, over 1 crore rupees worth of business sales for all the artisan groups, some of them who got onboarded first time digitally, almost 60 lakhs worth of relief support that we were able to reach out to, and so many students who otherwise would have been very lost during the lockdown, actually very gainfully connected with artisans, and very felt a sense of purpose in the way they helped them make the catalogs, however imperfect they were, and however much it was all done in a kind of a remote way. But still, I think it was just this collective energy that we were able to pull off all this. But having said that, the challenge is that it's how do you now sustain this, because at some point we have to get back to the normal, right? So how do we balance this learning? How do we also go forward with this understanding that you don't always have to create a new organization? I mean, people are all doing wonderful work in their own right. People have been doing it for years and years. You don't really have some brilliant new idea that you need to go and set up a new organization. You maybe need to just work together, and you maybe need to leverage each other's resources and each other's understanding. And that's really the way forward that even CD has now understood, that in our next avatar, now moving forward to the new normalcy, I think the whole collective has taken a decision that we will not register, we will not be a new organization, but we will work through our members. So whatever work happens, whatever opportunities that get created, whatever directions that emerge, will all be facilitated through the member network. So that's, I think, a very clear learning that has emerged for us. And then how do you balance it in a very fair, neutral way, where everyone's interests are taken care of? I think that's really going to be now the challenge. And even historically, I mean, what Shumita was saying about the skepticism of communities and so on, I think, let's face it, and today's times are showing that to us, that as a race, we are not peaceful. Okay, we are an aggressive race, let's face it. But somehow the wisdom of our elders managed to find some kind of equilibrium. The conflict management that they did, they didn't say that we all love each other. Okay, we all have prejudices about each other, but let's just learn to tolerate each other. Let's just learn to put up with each other. And there were those sort of checks and balances in society, right, which enabled that, whether they were taboos or whether they were, whatever. There were a number of sort of mechanisms that were there to sort of manage this. But I think today, with this, at one level, the digitization that has happened is sort of leveling many things. But at many, on another level, we may see the breaking down of all checks and balances, which is what we are seeing, right, in the fake news and the trolling. And so I think both these two things will happen, and it's a matter of time. It will find its own balance and its own way, because I do believe in my heart that at the bottom of all of us, there is goodness. It's just that we have to create the conditions for that goodness to emerge and flower, and for that to have its day.
No, that's wonderful, Meera. And I think what's very inspiring, at least for people like me who have been part of it, and also for a lot of others who are probably, observing this phenomenon, that something which has come together without any strong agenda, right? I think probably that was the key, that this group came together without a strong agenda, right? Not without a big hairy goal saying that I'm going to change world hunger, right? And sometimes I think that uh, uh, suddenly starts bringing in a lot of mental blockages, right? That I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, right? When you come with a very don't have a strong, it was almost like a clean plate, right? A clean slate. You came with a clean slate and said, what do we do together now? And and such diverse people, and as Ronald said, there's so much ego that, I mean, sometimes it's almost synonymous with many I mean, in general with social sector, but also I think in many cases I've seen that it makes it very difficult for people to come together and collaborate. So in spite of that, people came together, voluntarily worked together, and they're continuing to do that. I think, yeah, it's a great achievement, Mira.
Well, yeah, fingers crossed. We are still just at the beginning of the journey. So,
So Mira, just, I mean, how do you? I know you tried to answer this a bit, but how do you see this evolving? And I think it's been very well managed so far. You're not even registered. This is not even registered as an organization so far. It's just a community. It's a collective initiative. So how do you see the future for going forward?
yeah. So, okay, so a couple of important decisions that we have recently, been talking to all the members. And one was this very important decision that we would not register. But on the other hand, we do need the rigor of being accountable, transparent. There will be funding, we mobilized funding. There will be a need to measure impact, that, the work that everybody's putting in, how do we track it, that it's, even in terms of metrics, that, what are we actually being able to accomplish. So that decision was that while we would not register, we would have a rotating secretariat. So
Right.
every 2 years, one of the members within, and this is pretty common practice, right? Among a lot, this is not, I mean, creative dignity is not just one unique movement. I think there are many collaborators, and during the pandemic, we saw this phenomenon world over of, people coming together as collabs. So we are going to follow that established protocol of just having a rotating secretariat every 2 years. So for the first 2 years, it is being provided by Industry Foundation. The next 2 years, the organization that stepped forward is Sasha. They will take it on from there. And after 2 years, it will perhaps be the Crafts Council of India. So, they're kind of thinking it through. So that's one in terms of at least, basic rigor, accounting, transparency, managing the nitty-gritties of running the organization. The second is we are consciously, sorry, you wanted to say something, Shiva?
No, please go ahead.
The second is that we're consciously moving away from any kind of nomenclature like governing council or core group or core principal sort of lead or anything like that. So we just have a group of operational anchors who we understand now will require to be compensated because they will be putting in the day-to-day time. So we're trying to create a very lean structure where a very small group of people who can also then be rotated, right? I mean, they do their bit, they move on, somebody else comes. They work to bring in opportunities, to bring in networking, to bring in learnings, to bring in, all of this for the member networks. So we also realize that moving forward, we need to look at a couple of things. Our goals have to be very clear. Initially, when we started Creative Dignity, we had Karni, the management strategic firm, who helped us create this, very simple framework of, looking at our work in 3 buckets, which is the relief, which we began with, then rehabilitation and rejuvenation. So we feel that now moving forward, we are still in rehabilitation, and rehabilitation will remain for at least another 1 year. We don't think things are going to go back to normal so soon, but being very conscious that using this as an opportunity, like Ronald said, that how do we actually overturn this to go to where we really even wanted to go before the the crisis hit us. So really using this opportunity to completely transform the sector, if at all we can all do it with our collective energy. But keeping that in mind, we felt that we needed to focus on three clear goals, which is that we now really need to start speaking to the artisan youth of the country. A lot of pioneers, a lot of people who have worked in the sector have worked with artisans today to bring them to a point where they're now pretty kind of well connected. Technology also has played that role, right? I mean, from that earlier remoteness of being in a village, today they are well informed, they've seen opportunities, they've seen their colleagues do better, so they've come to a point where they are ready to interact with you on a very, very equal footing. They're ready for that. So we can't continue treating artisans like beneficiaries or the poor communities we need to support. I think that time is now over. There was fantastic work that everyone has done, all the pioneer organizations who have brought us to this point. And I think the next point is now that how do we actually fire the artisan youth who are totally disenchanted with continuing with their parents' practices? How do we fire them to take this forward? And like we also mentioned, that maybe the skilling that's required is not so much in the craft skills or the artisan skills, that they already exist. The skilling is something else that needs to be done, like we saw, for example, the digital skills which helped, or the marketing skills, or the organizing skills, or the storytelling skills, or there could be a number of skills, aggregating skills. There could be a number of skills that now need to be addressed, which youth could be motivated to take up and play that role in the community. So we feel very strongly that that's a focus, and what's the language we speak to that will fire them, that will motivate them, that will make this sector aspirational for them. So that's one. How do we do it? It's something we are discussing with all the member organizations. And I think Neeta also said that GOCOP would be very interested because it's something that you've already been doing in the past. So it's something you would also be interested to look at. So that's one area we're looking at. The other area we feel is the whole, what we're calling the ecosystem integration.
Yeah.
So really, how do you connect everyone together? And what could be a robust way to keep it very vibrant? And the third, so you have the artisan, then you have the ecosystem, and then you have the meta level, which is the advocacy. So how do you then actually advocacy, not just with government, but also with society, with mindsets, with changing people's behavioral patterns? And how do all these three link up with each other? So that's really the design we are looking at for the network. Yeah. Because
so I think,
yeah.
It's very interesting, Meera. So both I think the first one, I think is something that, I'm sure Ronald would also agree that, it's an area where we strongly believe that it's not sometimes just the craft skills, right? It's more beyond the craft skills, which are kind of missing in the ecosystem, especially at the clusters, especially in the artisan community. And how do you bring those skills, and how do you train them, and how do you build their capacity in those skills, I think is more important than just on product design development. So much of capacity building has happened in the last decade or so.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think the ecosystem play, how do you bring ecosystem together? Because I think as a community, what I feel is there's so much that can be done if we come together as an ecosystem. And I think, and I've seen people like, Women on Wings also doing this, putting in so much effort in bringing together organizations, trying to make them collaborate, saying that there's no point in reinventing the wheel, right? Everybody doesn't have to reinvent the same wheel. And, we'll only be reinventing the wheel. Nobody's, reinventing the whole, machine, right? Only wheel is getting reinvented.
Yeah.
So I think that way, ecosystem itself, how do you bring them together, and how do you make this an equal opportunity, and how do you engage people? And I remember one of our earlier conversations, Meera, where you said, in a way, like FICCI, what FICCI does for industry, right? Today, they're an enabler for industry, right? So we don't have something like that for social enterprises or even for craft organizations today. all said and done, industry bodies like FICCI and CII play a very important role, and they represent us, at various levels. Now, there are so many problems that entrepreneurs are facing today, but there is no, there's a very, for lack of words, there's a very NGO-centric view of things, and there's a lot of representation for that at maybe at different levels.
Absolutely.
But there are also, for-profit social enterprises, businesses. There are designers who are struggling, but I think their representation as a whole, as a craft ecosystem, has to be made at different levels.
Yes. I think
Uh,
that should be the ultimate advocacy that all of us move towards, which is to get all these players within one common ministry, to just have one ministry that addresses all cultural enterprises, all cultural practices.
yeah, I
That
think
would make
that
this
would be great.
that would
would
make
be
this
a
integration, a really
easier.
dynamic, even visibly. It will sort of create that visible, scale.
Yeah. Thanks, Mira. I think those are very interesting points. And Neeta, I hope you are taking some notes. I think we should definitely put down a good summary of this discussion. Very interesting points, Mira. Thanks. Sumita, back to you. I mean, just with, bringing our focus back to the current context, right? Where we are just coming, I don't know whether I can say this, but it seems like we're just coming out of COVID-19. I think maybe another 6 months or so, maybe, but I think, yeah, much better than how things have been in the last 8-9 months. So how has it impacted the artisan community at the ground level? Has it changed anything as business for Rangasutra?
Yeah, so Shiva, yes, initially when the pandemic hit us and there was a lockdown, like all of us, we were kind of thrown out of balance a bit. And that's when we decided to just sort of stay connected through digital technology, like how we are doing today. And as far as the artisans are concerned, like Mira mentioned, we did initially, because they couldn't do any work, we organized some relief money for them, and were able to do that. And I think the artisans, partly it could be because the fact that all of them are shareholders, or most of them are shareholders in the company. And right from the beginning, whenever we have not managed to get work for them, I actually get phone calls from women in rural ski. What's the point of being a shareholder if I'm not getting work? So in a sense, it's been a huge responsibility for us to ensure work. And similarly, through the pandemic, I think uh, we managed, we were, I will say, I can't say we were fortunate, but we did manage to continue our work from the minute the lockdown ended, which was in sometime in about May, June we started work. All our artisan clusters were working. Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, everywhere, Kashmir. And Kashmir was working even before through their lockdown. So that was something.
That's even further down. Yeah.
A big thing is the ecosystem bit that both Mira and Ronald talked about. We were, of course, with in constant communication. We with Mira, Ronald, everyone of our own, but with IKEA, who is our big partner. We managed to stress the importance of
Work.
staying close with us, of not delaying orders, not forget canceling, but not even postponing. And I think that's I would say for us in Rangsutra, that was one thing that I don't know how to define it. I mean, how to put it down. I should actually talk, put it down in better words. But I won't say that we were able to bring about a mindset change within IKEA, but with the constant, discussions that we had, they really saw how important it was to continue supporting us with the orders. And even if they did not know, whether it's going to sell,
Yeah.
take that chance. We will take that chance. They will take that chance they are taking that chance, and thankfully our products have sold, and the opening up globally has happened in ups and downs, because the countries like Germany is all shut down now. The US is also a lot shut down. But I think that's where strong partnership we've really managed to see. And I think that's, that in turn, because IKEA is a big player globally, so that in turn has also, I hope, influenced other retailers and other businesses to work more with social enterprises, because I think somewhere it's not just about, I will turn it around. It's not just about artisans who have to become market savvy. It's also the market savvy, profit driven businesses that have to understand that, it's not sustainable. Just financial profits are not sustainable. That ultimately it is social impact and environmental impact which are equally important. And that, so I actually see that there's a good turn to work with social enterprises, and I think this is a time when we can really capitalize on that, because I mean, we've got interest from a couple of new buyers who want to work with social enterprises. Of course, here the thing is, maybe I'm stepping one step ahead, but it's for the social enterprises also to become more efficient in some ways, should I say, to be able to deliver on time, to be able to deliver in quality, and and in an efficient way, which is also means price conscious, but ultimately that does even out when you scale up. So I think in that sense, the pandemic, and it's made us immensely grateful that we are all alive, that we are still, we have work. We have work, at least the Rangsutra community of artisans, all of us have work, and our team. But going ahead, I think that's the thing to strengthen also on the ground. How does one, I'm not saying capitalize in a negative sense, but really push forward this agenda, if I may say so, Meera, the agenda that social enterprises for profit, I'm talking about, for profit social enterprises are the way of the future, because it enables you both, in all three, to both make profits and be sustainable, to also ensure social good, and of course environment, what we are doing to the environment. That's somewhere we have to work a little bit more, I feel. But I think this is a time that we can, really have a good footprint and show the cooperative in entrepreneurship, as Meera has mentioned there. That's right. It's there, and it will be a challenge, because just like it's difficult to take different NGOs along, even within Rangsutra, it's difficult to take different clusters along, because the ones who originally started it said, why are these others joining in now, etc., etc. But eventually, I think that's the way ahead, and we are at a good place to push this on the world agenda, I feel.
That's great. That's great, Sumita. And I think it's great to hear that your buyers have supported, your customers have supported, and I think that agenda, that everybody is an important stakeholder, right? So we cannot do this without having our customers as stakeholders. So I think some of us, have to understand it, that the stakeholders are on both sides. It's not just the producers, but also the customers. I just also want to share something very interesting with GoCorp itself, Sumita, that we are not so much into B2B. We do have a few regular customers that we have been supporting on B2B, predominantly a B2C platform. And we have seen enormous support from our customers, from our consumers during the lockdown period. So from May till October, I think these are the most difficult months during the pandemic. And we have seen very strong sales, in fact, over 300% growth in sales online during this period. And customers were primarily buying also to support the ecosystem, right? To support the artisans, not just because they needed a sari, but there was a lot of social intent, and there was a lot of social perspective from our consumers, and that was very heartening to all of us at GoCorp. And of course, our buyers also, I mean, most of our buyers are fair trade buyers. So most of our buyers continue to buy from us, though there was lockdown in their respective geographies. They did not cancel orders. In fact, they continue to give us orders because they felt it was needed to keep the artisans going. So this kind of partnerships also with the buyers and customers is very important, I think, Neera. I mean, that understanding and buy-in and that respect, like as you said, right, artisans also have to understand their perspective of cost, quality, timelines, because finally, they also have to run a business. So if you give them something which is not sellable, which is delayed by 3 months, they miss a season. And that understanding on both sides and sensitiveness on both sides can really help. And I think, yeah, so Meera is we all look up to Meera. I think that's a good concept of cooperative entrepreneurship. That's a good term, Meera. So yeah, just Sumita, one last
It's
thing
an
from you.
established term, actually.
Yeah, I am.
So it's a lot of discussion is happening around it now, because they found that the instances where there was cooperative entrepreneurship, those guys were very resilient during a crisis like the pandemic.
Yeah.
They were able to sustain their workers because everyone was taking a collective decision as to how to manage resources and so on. Yes, sir.
Whatever little I understand, Meera, in fact, cooperatives or community-based enterprises are historically more resilient than market-led enterprises, right? I mean, this is a proven fact, and in fact, I think that's why United Nations also marked 2012 as the year of cooperatives. And I think now the new form, as Sumita said, I think cooperatives are being evolved into social enterprises. That's the next evolution, where they're saying that it's entrepreneurship mindset, but a cooperative principles, right? I mean, both come together. I think that could be a winning combination for social development. So one last thing from you, Sumita, I can see you smiling. What's your vision? So you have a great artisan base, a large and growing artisan base. Now I believe you are in UP. You're also in Orissa, I believe, if I'm not wrong, Northeast. So what's the future? What's your vision for the next 10 years? And the vision has to be 10 years, right? It cannot be 3-4 years.
Yeah, so a sort of really broad vision to work with crafts in each state of our country. We're just working in 6 states, so there are 19 more to go.
29 states, Sumita.
Sorry, 29 states now.
Yeah.
29. Acha, with Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh separate.
Telangana also, right? Yeah, Telangana.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but obviously focused more on the north and the east, because we have all you amazing people in the south doing such amazing work. So that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, to really have reach out with our products and our offerings to each country in the world.
That's a great vision. More power to you, Sumita, and the team. But yeah, I think what we have done with IKEA, if you can replicate that with, let's say, 10 large retailers, I'm sure you will be across the world, Sumita. So
maybe, inshallah.
Inshallah. Great. Ronald, this is I mean, this is the positive side, and this is a great example of a successful social enterprise. From your perspective, Ronald, and you have been mentoring so many of us, Rangasutra, GoCorp, how do you see, how do we take this forward? How can we create much larger impact, considering all the good work that you have been seeing, what you see happening right now on the ground? How do you envision a much greater impact? How do you envision, common synergies emerge from these different enterprises, different initiatives?
Right.
And yeah, what is your vision? What is your vision for the next decade?
Yeah. Well, Shiva, I think listening to the conversations and listening to Sumita and Meera, who could have been thinking that you call your customer your partner? And that's your, because normally it was the buyer and the seller, and they were opposite to each other. And now we talk about partners. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind also in the whole ecosystem and the whole handloom sector. Actually, between social enterprises, there is no competition. That's what I strongly believe. There's no competition between social enterprises. The only thing we can do with social enterprises is look how can we create more synergies between each other and how can we jointly create more impact. That's the only way how social enterprises have to work. And I think what Mira was telling about creative dignity, I think it's a wonderful initiative. It's really great, and I think that's exactly what happens during crises. And we have this saying in, at least in the Netherlands, and I don't know whether it's international, when the need is high, you learn how to pray. Then you really start praying. And actually, that's what's happened with creative dignity as well. But now, the real challenge for the future is that initiatives like creative dignity can really fade away again because things get back to normal and we are all human beings and we get back to the normal mode and we go back to our own field of working.
Silos.
And we go back to silos and we start working again. And I really appreciate the idea from Creative Dignity that they really want to continue and be a kind of a glue in the sector and facilitates the process of what has started during COVID-19. My only worry, if I listen to how they want to continue, is that I don't know, what you see in organizations, and especially if it's not your own organization, is that you need someone who takes the ownership. There should be someone like an entrepreneur in a social enterprise. There should be someone who carries the flag, who feels responsible, and who really wants to take it forward. I'm afraid if you leave it rotating to organizations, as soon as things get back to normal, I feel that it can fade away and we are, in 2 years' time, we are back to normal. And well, that's thoughts that I had when you were talking about the creative dignity. And I think it's the best start we could have in this sector. If we can bring these kind of collectives together where we break down barriers, we break down walls and see how we can create synergy in the sector. So we should put efforts in continuing the thoughts and the vision which was there in creative dignity. That's one. Yes, e-commerce. Yes, I think it's not really the revelation of COVID-19, but I think we make a leapfrog in e-commerce. On the other hand, we have to be careful. It's not the holy grail that we have found, because in a way, of course, it opens the world for everyone. But on the other hand, everyone is now in the market and you have to find your specific position in the market because everybody is reaching out. And here is what I feel that the handloom sector and the handcraft sector should even become stronger together, because not everybody can reach out to the market through their own website. Here is where we really need to collaborate together to really bring something about, to create a movement around handloom. And there we have to realize that outside is a harsh market. Of course, everybody now during COVID-19, luckily, I think everybody becomes more aware about the necessity of thinking about people, planet, and profit, and not only about profit, but it's also about the planet. We have to take care of the planet, everybody is aware of it, and we have to take care of the social aspect about the people. So people, planet, profit, I think that's more ingrained in the brains of many more consumers. On the other hand, I think we also have to realize that there is a lot of prejudice about handloom across the world. So as nowadays, I think people are absolutely willing to buy more conscious made products, but we have to make sure, and that's I think a challenge for the sector itself, that quality level, online delivery become hygiene factors, that there is no discussion about the quality of handmade goods, that's actually they are up to the mark, that we deliver on time. And
Right.
of course, there will be some difference, but we have to sensitize, and I think that's what we have to do as a sector, where we really have to come together. And what Mira was saying, there should be a kind of a ministry where this come together, and whether it's a ministry or a collective or whatever, we really should not lose the momentum at this moment. What we have achieved during COVID-19 in this handloom sector, that we keep the momentum and actually even make it bigger and reaching out to the market. So I think the start is there, but let's think a little bit more about how to continue and materialize it for the future for all organizations.
Great, Ronald. So, Ronald, this is again a question that at least you and I have been discussing for a long time, maybe a couple of years now. Do you see, because the craft sector, whether I don't want to be too critical, but if you see the size of the organizations in this sector, right? I mean, we're all still very small. We don't have too many 100 crore plus organizations in this sector, right? And the sector itself is large, right? I mean, to support and scale the sector, I think what we have been thinking and what we have been discussing, at least you and I, is that a larger enterprise has to come into picture, right? And sometimes a larger enterprise could also be formed by bringing together, smaller
Right.
enterprises, right?
Yes.
Create a platform of sort.
Yes.
In a way, it's a federation of enterprises, right? For lack of
Right.
words, right?
Right. Yeah.
So do you see that something like that can happen, Ronald? I mean, because having a larger enterprise brings a lot of advantages, right? Today, the economies of scale, the kind of market size that can come into picture, a lot of synergies in back end, a lot of synergies in front end marketing can come into picture. Do you see such an enterprise possibility in the craft sector?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It should be there, yes. If there is a moment in time that it could be realized, then it's now. Because I think the mindset at this moment is that at least at this moment, that we need each other. And I think that's the good thing of these kind of collaboratives like Creative Dignity. They break down the walls, and a designer from company X could give design inputs to other organizations. So if we can identify strong pillars in the handloom sector, in design, in supply chain, in dyeing, in different stages of the value chain of handloom, we can create strong, how do you call it, strong parts of the value chain, and we can bring it together up to the window to the market. GoGoWop is a good example. I think the Ministry of Textile has a handloom portal. Nobody knows about the handloom portal other than the industry itself, but the customers don't know about it. But it needs collaboration, and you need someone who starts working on it. And Creative Dignity is a start. That's what I absolutely have seen. And so I think that the intention is there, but now you need to, instead of having a sprint, like the Creative Dignity now is a sprint, but to really achieve this, it becomes a marathon. And to run the marathon, you need a lot of endurance, power, and training to realize it.
Yeah, what's your perspective on this, Mira? Right, so just to rephrase myself, right? So we've been again discussing that in the craft sector, there are so many small players, so many smaller enterprises. Let's say an enterprise which is very focused on on let's say carpets, right? There is an enterprise which is only focusing on um, let's say Dokra jewelry, right? And there is an enterprise which is only doing fabrics. Whereas I think the a larger enterprise vision, which could be a community-based enterprise or a collaborative network model, where these enterprises could come together and can work together for real business objectives, not just about collaborating and sharing resources, but actual business objectives, right? That it becomes like a federation, and that's what cooperative federations have been for a long time. I don't know, Sumita, if this is making sense, but yeah, you have cooperative federations which are bringing together smaller cooperatives and giving them common services, giving them common market linkages, and support, financial support also in many cases, which are difficult for these smaller enterprises to achieve individually. What is your view on this, Mira?
Like again, to come back to the original challenge, which is also our strength, but it is a challenge and we must face that. And that is that we are diverse. I mean, the nature of each and every enterprise, cultural identities, cultural mindsets of working also, they are so sort of varied, right? And I found that, at least in my experience, that sometimes, there's a reason why cooperatives have been stronger in the South and not so much in the West. So sometimes you have to find the right, that lowest common denominator on which you can bring people together. Like my experience working in Gujarat was that people were not so ready to work with each other uh, on an economic sort of transactional model, but they were ready to come together to fight on some common things like, Sanman or dignity to their work. So they were ready to come together on social issues, but they were not ready to come together on economic issues. So you have to find that right touch point on which you can bring such a diverse, group of people together. Now, if you're talking of a national level federation, I mean, there could be several models that we could sort of look at, several approaches, which all sort of come together as a whole, which in turn trigger certain market perceptions, which would lead to market creation, mindsets in what kind of products you're consuming, and so on. A little bit like what I think EcoStream is doing in Sikkim. So what they've done is that they've created this federation of different producers, uh, in a bit that if a big order comes, or if an opportunity comes, just the limitation of one's unit should not allow that opportunity to lapse. So they create this sort of connection, that how do you best organize it across that whole platform of groups who are part of that federation. So I think we have to look at, if especially one is looking at a national level presence, and I think it is time we stand up and get counted. And the only way we can do it is if we will show scale. Now, how do we show scale? It's not going to be as easy as, say, for example, the farmers showing scale,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
have to find different creative ways of doing it. That what is it that creates that common presence for all of us? What is it that we coordinate on? And indirectly that will generate a market shift. So yeah, that's my feeling, and I think it's something we'd like to experiment as we move forward. And totally agree with you, Ronald. I think we now require that level of expertise and organization. But how do we yet run it as a very lean sort of operation? I think that's really our challenge, that we want to keep it lean, yet it has to have that sort of strategy, vision, and
Right.
energy. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Shiva?
No, I think it does. I think it's something I hope will be experimented sometime soon, Mira. I think this is a potentially a good way forward. And even Sumita, maybe I would like to hear your thoughts also on this. But I think with such small scale, and when you look at agriculture, I think that's one big advantage, that you have large players, right? And scale is slightly different in agriculture, right? Maybe 100x as compared to craft. it's easier to show scale, and then that gives you a lot of attention. Probably a lot of other opportunities open up because of that scale. So bringing scale in craft is, I think, should be an important area to really take this, according to me, to take this sector forward. Sumita, your thoughts?
Yes, certainly. I totally agree with you. And the reason that, that we decided we have to scale up after a lot of dithering in the initial years because of my not-for-profit heart, which is still small is beautiful. But because of the large number of artisans in our country who do not have work. So
Right.
we decided that we have to scale up. And I think we have a lot to learn from the corporate sector in this, actually, and make that balance between community on the one hand and efficiency on the other hand. By efficiency, I mean what you're saying, Meera. Stay lean, stay lean. So as you scale up, in business terms, your OPEX doesn't go up as much. I mean, that's what happens in the NGO world, and very often, because our work is so much of work on the ground and so much of time spent in training, so your operational expenditures really go up high. So how do you how do you maintain that lean core, and be able to reach out to larger numbers, so that if you get an order and your cluster in Bikaner can't do it, where all can you tap in? A cluster in Bardmer, cluster in Kashmir, other hand embroideries. So I think that I personally, of course, which I forgot to mention, I am very inspired by Amul.
Yeah.
I think that they could do it with milk. We should be able to do it
Do it
with.
with craft. Come on.
It's non-perishable, and look at what they've done. I mean, of course, they received a lot of help from the government, I'm sure, to set up all that infrastructure. But I think it had what Ronald talked about. It had a strong leader, a Dr. Kurian,
That's what you need. Yeah.
who put it there, who put down his roots and just got it done, and so it sustains itself. I mean, all through the lockdown, I was getting, milk delivered to my house through Big Basket. They were all Amul milk that was being delivered to, and this. So in a sense that I think we can do it, but it does need. I think it does need some of that. Some core team which is really driven and has goals and targets to be able to have this federation, this kind of a federation approach. I mean, the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Market Federation, that's the name of Amul,
Yeah.
actually. That's the
Right.
real name of Amul. So, but it is a cooperative milk marketing federation, but at the same time, it has what's his name? I forget who heads it. It's like one person who heads it and who is answerable to all the farmers and all the cooperatives. And he, he was first batch Irma. I can't remember his name now. Who heads Amul now?
Sodhi, Mr. Sodhi, I think, right? Yeah.
Mr. Sodhi,
Sodhi. Yeah.
yes. Mr. Sodhi. And so that's, I mean, I think we have a lot we could go, we have a lot to learn from that. I mean, I feel that's the only way. And of course, also from, as I mentioned, from the corporate sector, also, I think we have a lot to learn in the sense of becoming more efficient in our work.
Sumita, we need you in creative dignity.
I am there.
No, I think with all the leadership around, and with all of you, I think it should be doable. That's what I strongly believe. It's required, and I think probably the only reason why we have changed the course in the dairy sector was because of this whole strategy, right? Building the scale, and the advantage there was the product was very homogeneous. That's the advantage. In our case, I think it's very diverse, right? The skills are very diverse. So the consumers are also very diverse. So there is different segments that we look at. That is a challenge in craft sector, but I think, yeah, with some creative thinking, and with creative dignity, I think, I'm sure some of these things can be addressed. Great. I think that was a wonderful discussion. I think personally, I think GoCop, we started off GoCop with a vision that we can all work together. So that the word co-op was chosen because it means working together, right? I mean, though we knew that we are not technically a co-op ourselves, the intent was that, can we all work together, and can we build an online platform? In a way, it's a virtual network through which, organizations, individuals, both consumers and also producers could collaborate and could be part of this platform. So it's been a very interesting journey for us so far. And I also must say, building a community has been difficult, has not been easy. But I think looking at the sector and the way, so time frame is very relative, right? So 10 years for a lot of organizations is just a starting point. So in that
The
sense,
Bu-
we are
yeah, the Buddha has been trying since the last 3,000 years. I think.
yeah,
True.
exactly. So yeah, we are just probably on day one or day zero. But yeah, we are hoping to really build this out as well, and yeah, play a very maybe hopefully play a constructive role in bringing this ecosystem together. So thanks everyone once again. This recording will also be shared on our social media channels, and I think we are pretty much on time. Let me see if there are any questions from the group. Any questions from from the audience, from the attendees, before we wrap up the session today? Okay, great. I think that was quite insightful. So then there are not many questions, but great. Yeah, I think with the closing line, I think it's always coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress, but working together is success. With the hope and wish that we continue to work together, let me thank all of you once again, and really hoping that we can work together to take the craft ecosystem forward. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
Bye bye.
for bringing
Thank
us
you.
together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Ronald. Thanks, Sumita. Thanks, Mira.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Okay.
Sumita.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.